It's time for Clemson Sports Talk with Lawton Swan.
Ready, set! Just call me Swanee.
Tiger style. Tiger style.
Finally, Clemson Sports Talk has come back to Drive Time. Hello, everybody. Lawton Swan back in the saddle once again. It is the show that shakes the Southland. Clemson Sports Talk for you each and every afternoon as you make your way around the great state of South Carolina and beyond, listening to us on incredible radio stations like Fox Sports Radio 1400, the Midlands, around the world on the iHeart Radio application. The GOAT hangs it up. Tom Brady, I tip my cap. Over the weekend, the rumors began to swirl. He backed off of it, said he hadn't made his decision. Today, the best to ever play quarterback in the NFL hangs it up after 22 seasons. We will definitely talk about that here on the program today. Plus, yesterday, the computers in the Atlantic Coast Conference offices were working, and they were able to navigate and put together a college football schedule. We'll take a look at some of those games from the Atlantic Coast Conference. We'll also take a closer look at Clemson's schedule here on the program. We'll get your thoughts on it. 803-450-0086. That is a text line. That is a phone line. We also have news on the front of the transfer portal. Shocker out of Oklahoma. What was Caleb Williams going to do? Dun, 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 dun. The former Sooner quarterback has named his destination. We'll tell you where that is. And no, we're not talking about the former Sooner quarterback that landed at USC, South Carolina, Spencer Rattler. We're talking about Caleb Williams again and where he landed. Some irony, I guess you would say, in where he ended up. But let's begin out of the gates here with Clemson's 2022 football schedule. And thank goodness, the Atlantic Coast Conference was able to get this thing to us before the summer. Clemson's 2022 football schedule, as we knew, will open September the 5th on the road in Atlanta against Georgia Tech in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Clemson opens the season for a second consecutive year in an NFL stadium. You remember last season, Clemson opened against Georgia in Charlotte. That's never happened before. This is still a home game for the Yellow Jackets. So ticket distribution is something I'm kind of wondering about. I don't know enough about it at this time, but with it being one of those kickoff games, perhaps we can find out from Gary Stoken, who is the executive director of the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, how that works in a game like this, and is there an advantage given to the Yellow Jackets? I would like to think so if I'm a Yellow Jacket, but I don't know for certain. All that being said, Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers, again, will open the 2022 campaign September the 5th. That is a Monday against the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. They will then play that Saturday, September the 10th, against Furman. New game announced on the schedule. Clemson and Furman, September the 10th. It will be a quick turnaround for the Tigers, as just 5 days after playing their opener against the Yellow Jackets, they will take on the Paladins in Death Valley at Memorial Stadium. I know everybody's anxious to get back into the groove of the college football campaign. And with that, you'll get two games over a 5-day span from September the 5th to September the 10th. Lots of excitement there, I think, for Tiger fans. Clemson is 36-0 against FCS opponents since Division I split in 1978, winning 35 of those 36 games, all by double digits. But anytime you get back in Death Valley, first Friday, the opportunity to meet and greet with friends and former roommates, etc., who you knew during your time there. I don't care if you're opening up against Florida State or Furman. It doesn't make a difference. The opening weekend in Tiger Town is always a good time. The following weekend at home, Clemson will take on Louisiana Tech. These two will square off for the first time in their history. Tommy Bowden took on the Bulldogs 3 times and went 3-0 during his tenure as Clemson's head coach. This will be the first matchup between the two teams with Dabo Swinney at the helm. September the 24th, the following week, Clemson goes on the road to Wake Forest at Truist Field. The Demon Deacons have not defeated Clemson. I mentioned Tommy Bowden earlier. Since October the 9th, 2008, and that was what ultimately led to Dabo Swinney taking the reins. Swinney now 13-0 all-time against the Demon Deacons and looking to go to 14-0 on September the 4th. One of the unique things about this, you'll recall, Wake Forest, of course, the defending Atlantic Division champions in the ACC. Obviously, Pittsburgh won the Coastal and ended up winning the league, but Wake Forest was the division champion in the league. Clemson, however, took care of business against the Demon Deacons in Death Valley at the back end of the season, walking away with a 48-27 win, but nonetheless still trailed the Deacs in the conference standings. The next week could be the most interesting game as the Tigers return home on October the 1st to take on one of the other teams in contention for the top of the Atlantic Coast Conference, or the ACC's Atlantic Division, I should say, and that's NC State. Clemson lost in double overtime last season up in Raleigh. Obviously, that is a team with Dave Doran at the helm that Tiger Nation just simply does not like, but they may be the most formidable opponent for Clemson in the Atlantic Division. And you could make an argument that by the time the clock ticks to 0 on October the 1st, we're going to have some real clarity, most likely, about the Atlantic Division of the league. Clemson's schedule, however, does not get any easier. They'll travel October the 8th up to Boston College. Clemson has not been up there in 3 seasons. They played 3 consecutive games at home against the Eagles in 2019, 2020, and 2021 because of the revamping of the schedule in 2020 due to COVID-19. The Tigers, however, will face off with Boston College for the first time on the road since 2018. The Tigers' 27-7 primetime victory in ESPN's College Game Day to clinch the ACC's division back during their 15-0 national championship season was the last time Clemson went up there. The Tigers have won 11 straight games in the series, its 7th longest winning streak against a single opponent all time, and the 4th longest against an opponent presently playing FBS football. Another weekend later, Clemson will travel to Doak Campbell Stadium. Let's not forget, that's October the 15th. And 2 years ago, you may recall, during the COVID-19 season, Clemson made their way down to Tallahassee, had 1 positive COVID-19 case, and the Seminoles refused to play the game, costing Clemson who knows how many hundreds of thousands of dollars in travel expenses down there. But the Tigers are looking to join the 1968 through 1976 Florida Gators as the only programs to ever win 7 straight games against the Seminoles. What a huge opportunity for Clemson and Dabo Swinney as they face off with Mike Norvell's Tallahassee, the Tallahassee tribe, if you will. 803-450-0086, 803-450-0086. So again, that is a quick look at the first 7 games of the season for your Clemson Tigers. One of the things I believe I left off earlier, let me just double check this. I'm feeling like I left off the bye week. No, it's coming up. Okay. Whew. I was like, man, I feel like I've left off the bye week here. Nonetheless, Clemson the following weekend, after that Florida State game, will host Syracuse. The Tigers and the Syracuse Orange facing off in Memorial Stadium October the 22nd. That following weekend, there it is, October the 29th. That's the bye week for Clemson, all ahead of a November affair on the road at Notre Dame, taking on the Fighting Irish. You'll remember 2 seasons ago, Clemson went up to South Bend, Indiana to take on Notre Dame without Trevor Lawrence, and the Tigers came away just short in an overtime loss. And you look at DJ Uiagalelei and the way he played in that game, throwing for 439 yards, the most passing yards ever against Notre Dame, and you honestly realize that double overtime 47-40 loss was not on the shoulders of the then freshman quarterback. It was really Clemson's defense that let the program down that night. But the Tigers would return favor, as Notre Dame was in the Atlantic Coast Conference that season. Clemson would catch them in the ACC championship game and hand the Fighting Irish a 34-10 loss, and both teams would end up advancing to the NCAA tournament, or the college football playoff. All that out of the way, you look at the schedule so far. I mean, there's some notable names when these teams are playing great football. Notre Dame, when they're playing great football, notable name. Florida State, when they're playing great football, a notable name. And then coming up on the back end of the schedule, when they're playing great football, the Miami Hurricanes, a notable name. We'll get to that one shortly. The following week after Notre Dame, however, Clemson on November the 12th will take on Louisville at home. Clemson's undefeated all time against Louisville. The Tigers are 7-0, if you can believe that, against the Cardinals, and they have played some very tight ball games. Clemson overcame a 24-17 deficit after 3 quarters last season and came away with a victory after a goal line stand at the 2-yard line in the final minute. That seems like the script for just about every game for Clemson a year ago. That victory against Louisville was a fourth-quarter comeback win for Clemson in back-to-back games, a first in Dabo Swinney's tenure. The following weekend, November the 19th, Clemson will host Miami. The Miami Hurricanes come into Tiger Town, marking the team's first meeting since 2020. Clemson that day routed the Hurricanes. They were a top 10 program, 42-17 in the rain. In the 5th matchup of AP top 10 teams in the history of Memorial Stadium, Clemson is riding a 3-game winning streak in the series, including wins in 2015, 2017, and 2020 by a combined score of 138-20. And all I can think about is 58-0, what Clemson did to the Miami Hurricanes the year they fired Al Golden. Clemson just demolished them, and Dabo Swinney kept Clemson out of the locker room at the half. There had been a little horseplay, a little rough play going on. And Swinney said, you win with class and you lose with class. And quite frankly, since Dabo Swinney said that, the Tigers haven't done a whole lot of losing. They've done a whole heck of a lot of winning. And given this schedule, and again, we haven't even gotten into my thoughts on wins and losses as it sets up, but a 3-game homestand on the back end, November the 12th against Louisville, November the 19th against Miami of Florida, and then, of course, November the 26th, Clemson finally gets South Carolina back in Memorial Stadium as the Tigers and Gamecocks will face off for the first time inside Death Valley since 2018, and what it would mean for Clemson Tiger fans and players and everybody to witness history if Clemson could indeed win a 8th consecutive victory in this series and do something that had not been done since pre-World War II. I mean, 1934 to 1940 was when Clemson's previous winning streak took place against the Gamecocks. Last season, a 30-0 victory. I've said all along for many years here on the radio, I thought that Clemson could run this thing out to 7, 8, 9, maybe even 10 consecutive wins in the series. I don't see that being any different this season either. I think Clemson will have a great chance unless there's some major injuries that mount up between now and November the 26th, plus playing that game at home for the first time since 2018, plus the opportunity to set a new consecutive win streak in the series. I think South Carolina has a lot to be concerned about from the motivations that the Tigers can have coming into that game simply because of the fact that they didn't get to host it 2 years ago. And there's this opportunity to cement yourself as having the most consistent or the best stretch of games against South Carolina in the history of the programs. I mean, when this happened back in 1934, 1940, football's a big deal, but it's not what it is today. And so will Clemson win a 8th consecutive game against the Gamecocks? By the way, the Tigers haven't surrendered a touchdown to South Carolina since 2018. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Well before COVID-19 was even a blip on the radar, the Tigers gave up their last touchdown to South Carolina. 803-450-0086. That's a quick look at Clemson's schedule. Here is the full rundown for you. And again, we have it over on our website. They will open the season September the 5th against Georgia Tech in Atlanta. 5 days later, September the 10th, they're home against Furman. A week later, they're September 17th, they're home against Louisiana Tech. The next weekend, they go on the road, September the 24th, at Wake Forest, back at home against NC State on October the 1st. They go to Boston College on the 8th of October. They go to Florida State on the 15th. They are back home October the 22nd against Syracuse. They have their open date on the 29th. They'll take on Notre Dame November the 5th on the road in South Bend, Indiana. And they close out the regular season with a 3-game homestand against Louisville on the 12th of November, Miami on the 19th, and South Carolina on the 26th of November. So that is Clemson's schedule as it lays out. What do you think about it? Hit us up, 803-450-0086, 803-450-0086. How do you think the Tigers will do in this matchup? If you simply just go through it and say, all right, what do I think about Team X versus Team Y? How do you think they match up against all of these teams as we navigate towards the college football campaign? I think when you look at it, and we will, a lot of how Clemson's going to be judged will be based off of what these opponents end up doing during their season. And I think everybody understands that, but we've also had to come to the conclusion, just given how good Clemson's been in recent memory, that they may not have to play their very best every single weekend to still qualify for the college football playoff. I mean, there are absolutely programs out there that have to have that flash, pizzazz. They have to look the part to be considered elite. I think Clemson, even though this past year was not the result anybody was hoping for, I do think that nationally that Clemson's reputation precedes them in a large respect, and they'll get an opportunity, maybe more so than others, to qualify for the college football playoff with a blemish, certainly without a blemish. I mean, it is not for Clemson at this point about who they play. It's about how they play and how they are recognized. And for all I can say, for all I know, when you look through this schedule, there's enough meat, I think, possibly even drop a game and still qualify for the postseason, the college football playoff, unless that's one of your conference games or against one of those low-level teams. But I even with conference games, you still might have an outside chance of doing it if you were to lose to, say, a Wake Forest, who goes on and loses a couple of games, and you end up in the ACC championship and you go on to win the ACC title. Maybe that carries enough water. But all in all, I think just kind of eyeballing it here, plenty of opportunities for Clemson to win a lot of games, but also some chances to make up for any mistakes that might fall into their laps in the schedule. All right, with a quick break, we'll come back. I'll give you my predictions, my very early predictions on the schedule after this. Back at it on a Tuesday afternoon again, taking a look at Clemson's schedule released yesterday. Entire ACC schedule. We'll get into that. Tom Brady. A little recruiting talk here today. I mean, it's going to be a loaded show. You can go check out the full schedule over on ClemsonSportsTalk.com and the article on the front page right now with all of the notes and nuggets that we just went into. But if I had to walk you through it, if you sat me down, you said, Swanee, you always talk about way too early rankings. What's your way too early prediction on what Clemson will do in 2022? And so the way I like to do this, and I've always done this kind of this way for our Gamecock friends, our fine feathered friends, when I'm doing their schedule, is I talk about games I think are for sure wins and games I think are for sure losses and games I would put as, a question mark. Now, the thing you have to understand is that question marks could absolutely become losses or they could absolutely become wins. And any, quote, guaranteed win or win that I go ahead and chalk up on the board pretty quickly doesn't mean it's going to happen. Clemson on the road, however, against the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, I think season opener. I know there'll be some quarterback conversations between now and then for the Tigers. But Clemson should have too many athletes, and that defensive line is so good. I think Clemson wins that game outright, not a question about it in my mind. I think that's the same thing that happens when the Tigers take on Furman 5 days later. No doubter. 7 days later against Louisiana Tech, I think Clemson pushes their opening record to 3-0 before going on the road at Wake Forest. I think we saw it a year ago in their blowout victory over the Demon Deacons. Clemson is just too good for Wake. Even on the road, even if that game's at night, I think Clemson presses in to 4-0. The North Carolina State game, October the 1st, at home, should be a big deal. Tiger fans will be worked to a fevered pitch because of the loss a year ago. I'm going to put that game, however, in my could go either way category. I mean, I really believe that is a game that could go either way, and I don't know there are many people out there that would question that, just kind of given the unknowns at quarterback for Clemson with DJ, and then you think about NC State, their expectations, could be a top 10 team. I'm putting them down as a unknown, a possibility. Could win it, could lose it. At Boston College, I like what the Eagles have done. Jeff Hafley, their coach, I don't think he'll be there much longer, quite frankly. I mean, he is a fantastic defensive mind. But I don't think they've got the horses to beat Clemson either. On the road, unless there's snow, I just don't see how Boston College can slow down Clemson, even though the Tigers weren't spectacular this past year when it came to putting up big numbers. But I expect to see an improved offense in 2022. Against Florida State on the road, look, I want to say no doubt, and I can't help but think that Clemson is going to be the more talented of these two teams, but the Seminoles always have recruited fairly well, and that talent is still in Tallahassee. So I'm going to mark that down as a questionable game that could go either way. Versus Syracuse at Memorial Stadium, no brainer. Clemson walks away from the orange. Too much talent for the Tigers. At Notre Dame, South Bend, Indiana, that goes into the we'll see what happens category. The Tigers, again, have been so good for so long against top-flight competition. But this is a Notre Dame team that'll have them at home. And this is still a Clemson team that couldn't overcome the Fighting Irish a couple of years ago in double overtime. So I got to put that in the could go either way category. Versus Louisville, Memorial Stadium, November the 12th. I like Clemson in that game. November the 19th against Miami. I think some people would want me to put that in the could go either way category, but I like Clemson in that game as well. I think Miami and Mario Cristobal still have some work to do in order to get the talent level where he would want it to be to compete against Clemson. And then against South Carolina, I think it's a more narrow score than the 30-0 victory this past season. But I don't think it's going to be all that much different. So I've got it just off the hoof. I've got Clemson with 9 wins and 3 what you call flip-flop or kind of questionable games. I think there's a chance that you could flip them all and the Tigers could go 12-0. I think the more likely scenario is like an 11-1 or a 10-2 season. But I know your expectations are that Clemson gets to the college football playoff. I don't see this team losing 3 games this year, however. So I think you wrap the regular season at 12-0, 11-1, or 10-2. I just think that's where Clemson is right now by comparison to their contemporaries. Again, that's not diving into every single roster and every single player that's available and who transferred in or portaled out. That is those 3 potential results, 12-0, 11-1, and 10-2, are what I would say are the 3 most likely targets for the Tigers this year when it comes down to the success that they could have in terms of their record. I think that's probably about where you are, 12-0, 11-1, 10-2. But there are 3 games that I really believe are those flip-flop type games. I just don't think Clemson loses all 3 of them. And I think they have a chance to go undefeated. 803-450-0086. Again, what do you think about the schedule ahead for the Tigers in 2022? Are you excited, disappointed, frustrated? How do you like the schedule that you saw yesterday? Stay with us. Rocking and rolling along with you, ClemsonSportsTalk.com, the website. Go check it out. Lawton Swan on Twitter at Clemson Sports. Nearly 25,000 followers. That is absurd. I would like to push those YouTube followers up, though, so subscribe today. Ring that bell. Find out when we go live. Still working on the studio, getting closer. Every day we take one step closer to greatness here. Appreciate everybody being a part of the program, especially my buddy Rob Sanders. He hosts the rundown from 3 until 4 o'clock. Go check out his program. Get the podcast if you can't listen live. I mean, that is the great thing about this show, and that is the great thing about what we have done here during our tenure at iHeartMedia is that we have always kept the podcast going. And when we arrived, I don't know that anybody else was podcasting their show, but that was one of the things I didn't want to give up. And it's really worked out because we get tons of people downloading the show every day. I wish more of you that downloaded it would contribute. Is it contribute? Yeah. Contribute to the program, like call me and say, hey, or leave us a message and say that hot take stunk, whatever. I will take your criticism here on the program. 803-450-0086. Again, we've been talking a lot about Clemson's schedule today. I mean, I've got it anywhere between the possibility of going 12-0, just being more talented than everybody you face, 11-1 or 10-2, probably the likely scenarios. And I think that's where most people are going to fall when they look at this Clemson schedule. Could you lose to Wake and NC State and Notre Dame and Miami and Florida State? I mean, could you lose a lot more games and finish 6-6? Yeah, maybe. I mean, especially the question marks that you've got right now about the offense and the quarterback situation. And then, of course, Wes Goodwin, one brick doesn't build a house. It was a pretty good brick, though, against Iowa State. You know, do the defensive numbers hold? I think I trust that the defensive line, given the depth and talent, is going to be a pretty tough out for most teams, which could cause offensive issues for those opponents that Clemson will play, and thus present opportunities for the Tigers to, maybe put more points on the board. It's kind of like the defense has a chance to be so good that it can mask some deficiencies that the offense might have. And I think that a large percentage of you, if you were pressed to select an 11-1 regular season or a 10-2 regular season, or dare I even hypothetically throw out there a 12-0 season, I think most of you would say, well, the way that happens, Swanee, in my opinion, is if the defense is just dominant. 803-450-0086. Again, I want to hear from you on this. What are your thoughts on the schedule? Do you like the fact that by the mid-season, you probably have some idea whether you're in or out as it pertains to the ACC championship? Because I'm not going to lie to you, when you've got Wake Forest and NC State back-to-back weekends very early on, you're probably going to find something out about your program pretty quickly, given the fact that the majority of experts, of course, a has-been, a spurt is a drip under pressure, as my dad always said. But if you think about it from that standpoint, most people are going to say that those are the two teams in the Atlantic Division that will challenge Clemson this year. I mean, look, Florida State's always going to be in that conversation. I mentioned that a little bit earlier, and that holds firm. Like the Seminoles, simply because they're the Seminoles, are going to be mentioned in that argument. But I think the fact that those matchups happen so early in the season, in a lot of respects, could set up and tell the tale of the rest of the year. Like, let's pretend for a second that Clemson comes out of those two games with losses, and the Tigers start the season 3-2. Well, any prediction, whatever that I've said about the schedule thus far, at that point probably changes, because doubt begins to creep in. And I think that a large percentage of the success that you have comes from confidence and comes from believing in yourself. And if you were to get beat in the first couple of games and it looks like you're not going to be able to run these guys down in the conference, then I think it becomes increasingly more difficult to find every single win that we just kind of went through and said, hey, I think they can win that one. I think they'll win that one. A year ago, what Clemson did great was they had the slow start, but they finished strong. Do they have a couple of seasons of that in them? Now, personally, I think they're going to get to the ACC championship game, and I think they're going to have a chance to get back into the college football playoff. But that would be, I think, the thing that you would have to ask yourself is, if they open 3-2 and lose to Wake and NC State and get themselves behind the 8 ball, 5-6 games into the season, how do they finish? How do they finish? 803-450-0086. All right, Tom Brady announced earlier today he is hanging it up. You can find podcasts where I am not hashtag all in with Tom Brady. And it really didn't have anything to do with wanting to put Joe Montana or any other quarterback on a pedestal above him. It simply had to do with the fact that before I was willing to anoint him, I needed to see him unequivocally take the crown. And he did. Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback, and in my opinion, the greatest player in terms of success that the NFL has ever seen, decides to hang it up after 22 years. We'll talk a little bit more about that here on the show that shakes the Southland. It is Clemson Sports Talk as we roll towards the top of the hour of hour one. Hour two, set to be joined hopefully by Mike Yuva from GamecockCentral.com. Stay with us. Final segment of hour number one, Lawton Swan with you. Tom Brady no longer playing the game that he loves in the NFL. Brady has retired. That news coming out earlier today. Again, over the weekend, it started to break, and then it kind of backed off of. They were still thinking about it. And I think Tom Brady was sad that it got broken to, the public simply because I don't think he wanted to steal from the NFL this past Sunday. I mean, I honestly believe that if he could have done it his way, it would have come out today, and that would have been it with the layoff between now and the Super Bowl in a couple of weeks. But he officially announced it on an Instagram post saying he is not going to make that competitive. He is not going to make that competitive commitment anymore. He said, I have always believed the sport of football is an all-in proposition. If 100% competitive commitment isn't there, you won't succeed, and success is what I love so much about our game. Brady said there is a physical, mental, and emotional challenge every single day that has allowed me to maximize my highest potential, and I have tried my very best these past 22 years. There are no shortcuts to success on the field or in life. Brady says it is difficult for me to write, but here it goes. I am not going to make that competitive commitment anymore. I have loved my NFL career, and now it is time to focus my time and energy on other things that require my attention. I've done a lot of reflecting this past week and have asked myself difficult questions, and I am so proud of what I have achieved. My teammates, coaches, fellow competitors, and fans deserve 100% of me, but right now, it's best I leave the field of play to the next generation of dedicated and committed athletes. Tom Brady, hanging it up, 44 years old, the most championships won by a single player, 5 Super Bowl MVPs, 7 Super Bowl championships. I mean, it's unparalleled what he was able to do. And I think the fact that he ended up in Tampa and won a Super Bowl only added to his credibility, to his legacy. He played 20 seasons with the New England Patriots, 2 with the Buccaneers, has the most touchdown passes in the NFL history, with 624, the most passing yards in the NFL's history with 84,520. He's got 243 regular season wins. That's the most in NFL history. 35 playoff wins. That's the most in NFL history. That's 19 more than any other quarterback. Joe Montana had 16. He had more than double Montana, the second best at that spot in terms of postseason wins. He had the most Super Bowl appearances with 10, the most Super Bowl wins with 7. I mentioned the 5-time Super Bowl MVP, all-time playoff leader in touchdown passes, passing yards, and completions. 15 Pro Bowl selections. That's the most ever. 3-time NFL MVP in 2007, 2010, and 2017. He was the 2009 Comeback Player of the Year, and he was named the NFL 100 to the NFL 100 all-time team. I mean, the guy was phenomenal. Now, I think there are some questions to be asked about the level of success he had for a couple of reasons. One, most notably, he isn't the highest paid person in his house, right? His wife, Giselle, makes more money than he does. And so I wonder how advantageous that was for him when it came down to not needing to go get that $400 million contract like, say, a Patrick Mahomes has got. I do wonder if a percentage of his success was more about the fact that he didn't have to command the highest dollar because his wife was already making a lot of money. And I'll give you an example of first off, it would help you because you could put better talent around you, right? But imagine a day and age where, say, I don't know, Jeff Bezos' son or daughter or somebody is either A, the quarterback, or B, married to the quarterback from one of these top teams. And she's got boatloads of money. And you don't have to command as much. You don't have to even be willing to necessarily put yourself on par with the highest paid players in the league if you don't want to. Because money is not the thing you need. Money is not the thing you desire. Money, especially if you just love the game. And so it could be argued, and I'd be more than willing to hear it, that you think Tom Brady was successful or more successful than you would have expected because of the fact that perhaps he didn't have to command top dollar when it came down to every single contract. I mean, that's legit. That's a legitimate thing to say, but the numbers are still there. The consistency is still there. The winning a Super Bowl in Tampa was no doubt a big deal. And every number that he put up cannot be taken away from him. But I think it is at least worth bringing up that, hey, you know what? He didn't have to. He didn't have to be the quote-unquote breadwinner in his family. He could just play football for fun and let other guys get the majority of the money if he wanted to. We'll talk with our good buddy Mike Yuva, who's a huge New England Patriots fan, about that topic when we get back. Stay with us.
It's time for Clemson Sports Talk with Lawton Swan.
Ready, set. Just call me Swanee.
Tiger style. Tiger style.
It is hour number 2. That's Drive Time right here on the show that shakes the Southland Clemson. Sports Talk. Lawton Swan with you. Mike Yuva, GamecockCentral.com, joins the program. And Mike, I know you are and were a huge Tom Brady fan during his time with the New England Patriots. What are your thoughts today after the news came out that he is retiring?
I feel like I'm old. I'm seeing that news, and then just last night, Adam Vinatieri's son commits to UMass to kick. So my whole childhood is just done. David Ortiz retired, and he's in the Hall of Fame now. Brady's going to be in the Hall of Fame in the next 5 years. And like I said, Vinatieri is having kids go on and get scholarships at playing Division I football. So it's crazy. It's surreal. You know, we all knew that at some point this moment would come. And I think if there's anything that you can look at and be happy about, regardless if you're a Patriots fan or not, is the fact that he left on his own terms. You know, you look at what happened with Peyton Manning in his career. I mean, that does not take away anything he was able to accomplish. But the point being is the fact that Brady was able to have a historic season, leading the league in passing yards, throwing for the most passing yards of his career. And he does it at the age of 44. And, you know, at least you assume he walked away from the game unscathed. That's big, and now he's going to be able to go enjoy that with his children, his wife, and he certainly deserved it. And I mean, shoot, he's got nothing more to prove. He comes back next season, wins the Super Bowl. Does that make any difference? No. I mean, he's proven that he is the greatest of all time. And I don't think we will ever, ever, ever see anything like that ever again replicated, because you need a lot of luck, you need some talent, and you need to be able to stay healthy. And he certainly was able to do that for the majority of his career outside of that one season when he tore his ACL.
Mike Uva with us here on the program today, again, talking about Tom Brady's announcement that he is retiring from the NFL. And I talked about this just a little bit ago, Mike, and I'll get your thoughts on it. How much did he benefit? Look, I can't deny what he does. Like, you watch him play, he is special, right? I mean, there's no doubt. But how much of his success also was a byproduct of the fact that his wife made all the money for a good portion of his career, a lot of money, enough that he didn't have to, he could leave plenty on the table for the teams that he was on. Am I wrong on that front?
Shoot, you know what? You're a wise man, because there was another smart guy that came on your show and said this a couple weeks ago or months ago. And that was me, I like to say that because I don't really have anything smart ever really to say. But no, the reason I mentioned that, Swanee, is you're 1,000% correct. We talk about the luck, the skill, and this and that. And this is, I learned at a young age, you never count another man's money, right? I mean, you look at someone's situation and you think you know it. I mean, a lot of these guys make a lot of money. We know that, right? But you never know exactly what they're going through. You don't know exactly where that money's always going towards. For Brady to not have to worry, or at least from the outside perspective, it doesn't seem like he has to worry about that because his wife's the breadwinner. She's a supermodel. That played a huge part in Patriots' success. And that's why I have a hard time, and I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer here, but that's why I have a hard time believing that Patrick Mahomes is going to be able to replicate any of this. And not just Mahomes, but the Chiefs going to be able to be that team that's always on the door knocking in the next 5 years from now. I just can't see it. I think a lot of people are getting ahead of themselves. I think they're looking at him and, Josh Allen and, no disrespect to Joe Burrow and everything that he's been able to accomplish in his second season in Cincinnati. But I say that because at some point, business is going to have to step in. And for the Chiefs paying a quarterback $500 million, it's the future, right? I mean, this is where the league is now. It's a quarterback-driven league. It's been like that for the last couple of years. But when you invest that much money into one position, never mind the fact that it's quarterback, one position, at some point, you're not playing with monopoly money. Cap space is going to be an issue. You have a lot of talented guys there, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. At some point, guys are going to want to get paid. And what are you going to do? You're not going to be able to just, give them IOUs. They're going to want to get real money. And, egos definitely can play a factor. I'm not saying that would be the big thing, but guys are going to want to make their money. And I just cannot see in Kansas City that being the case. And I think that right now is the closest thing to that next Tom Brady, right? And I don't think we'll ever see it again. But the reason I'm bringing this up is just to show how difficult it truly is going to be. So if people want to look at it, enjoy Patrick Mahomes, you should. But just realize, even with that all being said, with the talent, the arm, what he's been able to accomplish in his young career, he still has a lot of uphill battles to fight with. And a large part has to do with how much he's making. Great, you're making $500 million, but realize that's going to put you in a very difficult spot, and the team in a difficult spot at some point down the road.
Again, he's Mike Uva on Twitter at Mike_UVA. All right, so let's talk about the NFL real quick, Mike, and then we'll get over to some news from the folks over at GamecockCentral.com. What do you think about the Super Bowl? I mean, Joe Burrow, the number one pick 2 years ago, leading Cincinnati into the Super Bowl, and then, of course, the Los Angeles Rams. And not to mention the fact that both head coaches are 38 and younger, which it really, to me, is maybe says a lot about the hiring process in the NFL. I think this is a job that takes a lot more energy than maybe it once did because of all of the
no question.
the things you're dealing with. And I think that's might be part of the reason that you see the success of such young coaches right now.
Well, I think it's that, and just the fact that the NFL is such an offense-driven league now, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's coming from the college game. At some point, the NFL is going to have to catch up to what's being done in college, because these are how these players are being taught. This is what the players are doing from a schematical standpoint, and it's not only college, but it's trickling down to high school and youth football. I mean, shoot, not to make us all feel old here, but I mean, think about when you played youth football or high school football. I mean, I think about when I played high school football or even youth football. Youth football, there was really no passing. And now, I mean, you see youth football players, they go out there, they spread it out. Now, we could break it down one day in terms of the technique and this and that, are they being taught? That's a different story for another day. But the point being is it's catching up to a different level. And offense is flashy. Offense-driven leagues. I mean, it's not the days of old when the Belichicks and the Parcells and it was a defense-minded game, low-scoring affairs. I mean, they happen occasionally still, but I think that is what you're noticing more than anything, is that there's just more offensive-minded coaches, and it's not just happening in the NFL. Think about it in college football too. That's not to say you can't be successful from a defensive-minded coaching standpoint. I mean, look at Nick Saban, what he's been able to do in his career. So I say all that because I just feel like at some point, you're going to see younger coaches across the board. At some point, Bill Belichick's not going to be coaching anymore, and that's going to be weird, right? Brady and Belichick both out of the league. But as far as this matchup, Swanee, I think the challenging thing for Cincinnati is just how dang talented the Rams front seven is. I mean, they are just absolute freaks, and Cincinnati struggled. They struggled in that first game. What was it, 9 sacks? I mean, Joe Burrow got beat the crap out of. I mean, he was lucky that they were able to not just escape with a win, but he was lucky that he didn't get beat up to the point that, he was like missing the next week. So I expect the Rams to put pressure on them. And I think that experience for Sean McVay of being in that Super Bowl a couple of years ago against the Patriots, I think that's going to be the difference. Tremendous story for Cincinnati, tremendous story for Joe Burrow. I would love to see him go out there and win it, because I just like that. He's got like that borderline confidence / cockiness, but it's not cocky. At least what I mean? Like, you have to have, it's like that. We always say it's like, well, okay, he's got that swagger. He's got that swagger. He's confident when he goes out there. And it's just been a lot of fun to watch because, he has that, like, that screw you mentality. Like, okay, you don't think I can do it? All right, I'm going to go out there. But I think it's going to be challenging to go up against one of the best front sevens in the league. And then obviously offensively, they put on a clinic this year as well.
Mike, you've, again, GamecockCentral.com. Mike, one final thing before we do get to the Gamecocks. We'll talk about a former Gamecock. What was the takeaway from South Carolina fans after the game between Los Angeles and San Francisco when Deebo Samuel was being consoled by Odell Beckham Jr. and what was a pretty cool moment? I think even nationally, that wasn't just sports news. That was national news, that moment between two competitors.
Yeah, and then look, there's going to be some people that will find a way to make it a negative and, OBJ is this or that. At the end of the day, look, it's not that OBJ is, Tom Brady's age or anything like that, but you got to think about it. Deebo's been in the league for 3 years. A lot of these guys, they look up to him. They look up to some of these veteran receivers. And that's not a position like, obviously, quarterback that has a long shelf life, especially if you're one of the top tier guys. You just don't see it as much anymore because just the wear and tear. So I think it was a cool moment for OBJ to go over there. This is a moment that obviously he's been trying to get to. He wants to be able to get to that Super Bowl. That's the reason he basically forced his way out of Cleveland. But I thought that was pretty neat. Instead of, enjoying that moment right away, the first thing he's thinking about is, going over to Deebo. And I have no idea. I'm sure there's been talk shows and, maybe one of your listeners is listening to this and they could say, oh, no. Like, I know the background. They worked out in the off season or, they have a mutual workout buddy or this or that. I mean, it happens. There's so much crossover in the league. So regardless if that's the case or if it was just like, hey, you know what? I respect this young man's game. I'm going to go over there and tell him to keep his head up. I just think it was awesome. I felt like it was authentic. And I think, too, with Deebo Samuel, with the season that he had, on top of the fact that he had his child, too. He had his son this year as well. So it's been a roller coaster of a year for him. I can't even imagine how draining, both physically and mentally, it was for him, which is dealing with everything on the field and then, of course, everything off the field. But definitely a year to remember in so many different ways, not just from a football standpoint for Deebo.
Again, he's Mike Uva on Twitter at Mike_UVA from GamecockCentral.com. And speaking of Gamecock Central, Mike, you guys had some big news this week.
Yeah, very exciting. It's one of those things that stinks sometimes because from a logistical standpoint and from a legal standpoint, when those two words collide, they're usually not clean. And what I mean by that is, Gamecock Central for the last 18 years, we've been with rivals. But as of Tuesday, we are officially on a new platform, and that platform is On3. And I'm sure Clemson fans have been able to get their feet wet a little bit this past season with On3 with the tremendous job that Matt Conley does with covering the Tigers. So we're excited that Matt and I are officially on a team because he's been someone I respect the hell out of. So I can tell you from a Gamecock/Clemson standpoint, I mean, Matt and I were talking last night about it. There's going to be some exciting stuff down the road, especially when it comes to, collabing with football and basketball and baseball even coming up with the series coming up not too far from now. So we're very excited to join over there. And here's the beauty of it. Let's say you are a Gamecock fan, you're listening to this, or let's say you're not a Gamecock fan. You're just interested to see what's going on over the website. You can sign up all week for just $1 for the entire year. Whole year, you get $1. Think about that. I mean, I'm not a math whiz, but you do the math. Okay, 12 months divided by 1. I mean, you're paying pennies. And here's the best part too. I guess it's not that great if you're a Clemson fan listening, but you get a free Gamecock Central hat too. So, if you're a Clemson fan and want to get the subscription, you can either give that hat away to one of your Gamecock buddies, or you know what, you want to burn it? I don't care. I mean, do whatever you want. It's your hat. You earned it from putting $1 down. So, like I said, we're really excited. The cool thing about On3, I'll say this, it allows you to be able to see the other person's message boards now. Now you can't write on it. So if you're subscribed already to On3 for Clemson, now you'll be able to take a peek truly over the fence to see all the stories and everything that's being done from a Gamecock standpoint. Sometimes in the past with these other websites, you weren't able to do that. Well, you can do that here with On3. So we're very excited. And the big reason why we switched is On3 wanted us back. Brian Shoemaker, who's owned the company for a long time, and he started it in the late 90s. He said if they were persistent and they wanted to move Gamecock Central over, and Gamecock Central is something that he owns. It's not something that rivals own. I think people mix that up sometimes. So we're moving on over. We're very excited, and we have a lot of great content already. Could be a story coming out tomorrow too. So be sure to keep an eye out on that as well.
There we go. Mike Uva, again, GamecockCentral.com, making the move to the On3 network. Final thing for you, Mike, and we'll get you out of here. I know that listen, if we brought up South Carolina women's basketball, they're the most dominant force in women's hoops in a long time. But what's the latest news on the men's front as it pertains to the South Carolina men's basketball team? I know a lot of fans in recent years have been kind of up and down on the program, on Frank Martin's program. What's the latest?
Well, the latest is this. If you don't want Frank to be back next year, these 3 wins in a row this past week means absolutely nothing to you. You go back, you get the copy and paste message that you put on the message boards or Twitter when they were on their 3-game losing streak, and people are still inserting that. So there's still that same crowd out there. But I feel like if they're able to get the win tonight against Mississippi State, now you're riding a 4-game winning streak. You're right now in the middle, tied for 6th place in the SEC. If you get this win, that's going to bump you up to just over that middle mark. So you have a 4-game winning streak, and now you do something which I feel like I'm talking about football for a minute here in a way. And And I'm sure this is the issue with Gamecock fans. It gives you hope. Now, that's a scary thing. South Carolina had some hope for football against Clemson.
Right.
That didn't turn out to waste of them. But I think the difference is with this is that stadium, especially those 2 wins at home against Vanderbilt in Georgia, where they went on just absolute tears in the second half, the student section has been absolutely incredible. And I give a lot of credit to the University of South Carolina's athletic department for pushing that out there with those student tickets, because that place, the cockpit is what they're labeling it as now moving forward. That thing has been sold out. The problem is from a stadium standpoint, and, it's obviously difficult when you have 18,000 seats. It looks a little more empty. But the point being is if they're able to get this 4th win, now you come home on Saturday. You have 3 you've got a lot of tough games coming up, but you have 3, as of right now, 3 ranked teams that you have to play in the month of February. Here's the good thing, though. All 3 of those ranked teams have to play in Columbia. So if you're able to get some momentum, 4-game winning streak, if you beat Mississippi State tonight, Tennessee comes into town Saturday ranked. It makes a difference. It makes a difference, Swanee. If they win tonight, I'm not saying that place is going to be sold out at Colonial Life Arena, but I think we will see an energy in that stadium that we have not seen in a long time. And what we've seen from this team since losing to Arkansas after playing like absolute garbage in the second half, it's been a wake-up call. And they have come out fighting in the second half. They have just beat the living crap. They have just beat the living crap out of these teams. Want to know how bad it is, Swanee? Last 3 games, they've outscored their opponents 138-87. I'm glad I had that stat right in front of me from the story I did yesterday. That's how crazy it is. So if they're able to get some momentum going early in the game against Mississippi State tonight, if they just keep playing the way they have in the second half, I would not be shocked to see South Carolina get the win tonight, go into Saturday's game in that stadium, actually having some hope and having a real sense of buzz for the first time in quite some time.
That is a 7:00 tip-off on ESPNU as the Gamecocks take on Mississippi State. And then, as Mike said, Saturday they'll take on the 22nd-ranked Tennessee Volunteers at 1:00 on CBS. And they've got Kentucky, the 5th-ranked Wildcats, making a little run on February the 8th at 7:00. So there you go. Mike, buddy, always appreciate you again. GamecockCentral.com, the website. We'll talk to you next week.
Appreciate you guys. Take care.
Up against the break here. Hour number 2 rolling along. Appreciate Mike Uva. We'll hit a quick break. We'll come back and react to some of that and much more after this. The show that shakes the Southland Clemson Sports Talk, Lawton Swan. The Atlantic Coast Conference, talking with Mike Uva, I was looking at South Carolina's basketball schedule. Look, the Atlantic Coast Conference for so many years was sort of seen, and rightfully so, as the cream of the crop in college basketball. And when Duke and North Carolina and back when Maryland was in the league and they're playing at like this high level, and Virginia, and I mean, you just kind of go on and on. There's a lot of depth, a lot of talent, and conversations about how good that league was. Of course, the Big East at one point, maybe even occasionally the Big Ten, were making a name for themselves in that same conversation. But, man, I mean, if you honestly look at South Carolina's schedule or the remaining games that they've got this year, again, they take on Tennessee on the 5th, as I mentioned. That's Saturday. 22nd-ranked Tennessee Volunteers. Former Clemson Tiger, head coach Rick Barnes there, 1:00 on CBS. Number 5, Kentucky. And as I said, Kentucky's kind of made a run up to this point. Then you've got number 25, LSU. Ironically, former Clemson assistant, or not even assistant coach at Clemson. What was Will Wade's title at Clemson? I mean, I know he graduated from Clemson, but I'm trying to think, what was his title when he was there? Let me see if I can pull this up real quick. He was a grad assistant at Clemson from 05 to 07. Now making $2.5 million coaching at LSU. But the Bayou Bengals are a top 25 basketball team currently. I mean, a fringe team right at the edge, sitting there at number 25. And obviously Tennessee too. But even still, Auburn's the number 1 team in the country. I mean, the SEC right now, not a bad basketball league, especially if you start to kind of compare notes with the ACC at this point. But I think that's something to certainly consider when you look at South Carolina's home stretch and what they may have a chance to accomplish on the hardwood this year. 803-450-0086. 803-450-0086. But there is no doubt in my mind when you look at what the Gamecocks have done, the 3-game winning streak, sort of answering or atoning for their 3-game losing streak with now some opportunities to extend it again tonight. You know, the Gamecock fans come after, they do. They come after Frank Martin like crazy. And it's amazing because Martin got South Carolina to a Final Four, a place as a Clemson graduate I can only dream of getting. But as for the Atlantic Coast Conference, just pulling it up here in the AP, the Duke Blue Devils are ranked 9th, and that's it for the league. Not another team ranked in the Atlantic Coast Conference in the top 25 in the AP poll. Miami's getting some votes. Notre Dame is getting some votes, but that's it. While the SEC has Auburn at 20-1, extending. By the way, the Auburn Tigers, I don't know if you saw this, but the Auburn Tigers extended the contract of head coach Bruce Pearl for, I think, another 8 years. I mean, their only loss this season, a 115-109 loss to UConn. Other than that, they are undefeated. And I was telling, I can't remember the kid's name off the top of my head right now, so I can't worry about that necessarily as it pertains to the best players in the country, the kid from Gonzaga. But Auburn's got this Smith kid, I think's his name. Jabari Smith, the 6'10 freshman out of Fayetteville, Georgia. Yeah. I mean, he is a baller. 6'10, can run the floor, can handle the ball. That's rare talent. And I'm sure somewhere along the way you get into it, we probably find something fishy when it comes down to the recruitment of Jabari Smith to Auburn, given the track record of Bruce Pearl. But you know what? I always said it, man. I've always said this about Clemson basketball. You're better off doing what Auburn's doing right now and risking it for the biscuit, for the benefit of your program long term, even if you have to take a hit. They're the number 1 team in the country right now. Kentucky's ranked 5th. That's 2 SEC teams in the top 5. Tennessee's 22nd. LSU, again, is 25th. So 4 SEC teams ranked. The Atlantic Coast Conference with 1. Yeah, it's not a good look for the quote-unquote basketball league that people want to perceive the ACC to be when there's just right now, I think that the one and done has hurt. The fact that players have to report to campuses for a year has hurt the ACC and some of those traditional powers. And, I don't know what the fix is for them, to be honest with you. I truly don't. Now, the other kid I was talking about over at Gonzaga, I wanted to pull them up because they've got a freshman as well who is just Chet Holmgren, center. For his size, the things that this guy can do, he's a string bean. He is a skinny dude, but he's 7 foot, 195 pounds out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, averaging 14 points, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, and he can just shoot from the perimeter. They are a high-scoring team. I'll tell you, Gonzaga came up short a year ago, losing to Baylor in the national championship, but they got a great chance to win it this year. They are going to be a tough out. They still got Drew Timme on the interior, but Holmgren just adds he is a different bird. He's a different piece of the puzzle. And trying to match up with them, in the NCAA tournament, given the way they're scoring right now, if they continue to play this way, I mean, they are a good ball club. 803-450-0086. Again, Clemson's football schedule came out yesterday. The whole Atlantic Coast Conference schedule came out yesterday. We'll talk about some of those other matchups right here when we get back on the show that shakes the Southland. You're locked in to Clemson Sports Talk on a Tuesday afternoon. The show that shakes the Southland, Clemson Sports Talk. Lawton Swan on Twitter at Clemson Sports. Again, we were talking about the Clemson schedule. The ACC finally got it out. I don't know, man. When I was in college, I remember my roommate had like a Pentium processor, and I was still running on, God, what was that thing? I was on an IBM PS2. Didn't even have a Pentium in it. Like 333 megahertz. I mean, that bad boy was awesome. It was terrible when you look back on it. But the ACC got their Pentium processor fired up over the weekend, I guess, and found a way to give us a schedule. Why they can't get the schedule out sooner is beyond me. Your boy Swanee can't figure that out. Now, a couple of quick notes here. Games against Notre Dame this coming season in the ACC. Notre Dame's at North Carolina, September the 24th. Notre Dame is at Syracuse, October the 29th. Clemson's at Notre Dame, of course, as we mentioned earlier, November the 5th. And Boston College is at Notre Dame, November the 19th. Games against teams in the Alliance. That's that Big Ten, Pac-12, ACC Alliance. Rutgers and Boston College, September the 3rd. Duke at Northwestern, September the 10th. Virginia at Illinois, September the 10th. And Purdue's at Syracuse, September the 17th. The ACC also has postseason bowl agreements in place to play the Pac-12 in both the San Diego County Credit Union Holiday.com/ bowl and the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl. In 2022, the ACC will play the Big Ten team in the New Era Pinstripe Bowl at Yankee Stadium and the Duke's Mayo Bowl in Charlotte, North Carolina. As for some of the other games that you might want to lock into as it comes down to the 2022 college season in the Atlantic Coast Conference, I'll go through a couple of notable ones here for you out of the opening. Florida State taking on LSU is one of the opening matchups on September the 3rd. You've also got another game that I would certainly want to keep my eyeballs on that opening weekend, simply because Pitt won the Atlantic Coast Conference a year ago, and they're taking on West Virginia in what I think could be maybe a little bit of a measuring stick game, if you will, as it comes down to the beginning of the season and whether or not Pitt, minus Kenny Pickett, will be playing for any opportunities or a realistic opportunity of getting back to the Atlantic Coast Conference championship game. Like, who's going to challenge Clemson out of the Atlantic Coast Conference's Coastal Division is anybody's guess. That has been a revolving door, but an opening week matchup against a Big Ten team in West Virginia might give you some tinge of an idea of what you could be looking at. Miami, the third week of the season, September the 7th, they will be on the road. And again, I didn't even tell you this, by the way. Florida State on the road against LSU in that game. Miami on the road in College Station taking on Texas A&M. Again, that is the 17th of September. You've also got an Atlantic Coast Conference ACC game that same weekend as Georgia Tech will host Ole Miss. So a couple of ACC, SEC games that weekend, at least to kind of eyeball from afar, if you will. Moving forward, Louisville takes on South Florida. The Bulls, still coached by former Clemson Tiger assistant Jeff Scott. For anybody that wants to see that, that's September the 24th. Louisville will be hosting the South Florida Bulls. Other notable games that weekend include the aforementioned North Carolina Notre Dame game that we talked about just a little bit ago. Following that weekend, you kind of cross over into the section of the calendar year or the campaign for the league where most of the games the rest of the way are in conference matchups. So not going to, bore you with giving you the rundown of what that looks like. But I will say here are a few other games that I would encourage you to tune into. Miami and Virginia Tech on October the 15th. Miami is on the road at Virginia Tech for that game. Also, I think another game that you would want to keep your eyeballs on as it pertains to the Atlantic Division of the ACC would potentially be Florida State's matchups with Wake Forest and NC State, which come on back-to-back weekends following Clemson playing Wake Forest and NC State on back-to-back weekends. So get this. The Tigers go to Wake Forest on September the 24th. They play NC State on October the 1st. That's the same weekend that Florida State hosts Wake Forest. And then the following weekend, Florida State goes to NC State. So over a 3-game weekend there, not only will Clemson probably find out a little bit about how its standings will fall in the Atlantic Division, but Florida State will have an opportunity to insert themselves into that conversation before facing Clemson that following weekend on October the 15th. So for the Tigers, they play Wake Forest, NC State, Boston College, then Florida State. The Seminoles play Wake Forest, NC State, then Clemson. So there's a little stretch there in the ACC Atlantic Division, starting with Clemson on the road at Wake Forest September the 24th, concluding with Clemson on the road at Florida State. That could very well be a 4-game stretch that truly determines the ACC's Atlantic Division. Just kind of eyeballing it from afar. Those are some of the games that I'd be willing to keep my eyeballs on. And one last kind of cool thing here. Of course, we all know that former Clemson offensive coordinator Tony Elliott is at Virginia. Well, the Cavaliers this season on the 19th of November will face the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers, and that game is a home game for the Cavaliers as they will host the Chants. Interesting matchup there for sure as it kind of pertains to the connection between Clemson, Tony Elliott, Willie Corn at Coastal Carolina, etc. But that's a quick look at some of those games from the league. Final segment wraps up on the show that shakes the Southland on a Tuesday right after this.
What have you done for me lately? It's a fair question. Just don't lose sight of the bigger picture. Don't forget history. Lucky for us at Clemson, the answer to the questions, what have you done for me lately, and what have you done always, are the same. We win.
Final segment on a Tuesday afternoon, the show that shakes the Southland. Tomorrow, we haven't even mentioned this, is the National Signing Day. I mean, it's weird because there is no question that the luster of this day has been stripped away because of the early signing period and what goes into that. One recruiting note from earlier today as well, Clemson did pick up the commitment of Trent Pearman, of course, his father, Danny Pearman, a part of the Clemson Tiger football team. And I think the statement that was made by some people was like, man, this better have been a preferred walk-on spot. And yes, I do believe that is the case. As it pertains to his opportunity, and certainly should be. I mean, look, I've always said if you're going to be critical about anything that Dabo Swinney and the coaching staff at Clemson have done as it pertains to the roster at this point. It's the fact that coaches who have six-figure salaries, kids are on scholarship. I mean, now that is nearly criminal. Like you could pay the way for those kids to go to school and throw out some scholarships to other people. I know when Dabo Swinney got asked that question about the use of scholarships on players who weren't 5 stars or whatever, he threw it. Well, would you have us not recruit a guy like Will Shipley? And my response here on this show was, no, but I would think that Will and Drew Sweeney wouldn't need scholarships. And that could have gone to 2 other guys, whether those are 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. I mean, there is still the body in the room, and the scholarship was gobbled up. Now, you might say, well, you backfilled those because you didn't have the players on campus or in the locker room to fill them with anyway, and that may be the case. But I would think that would be something you might want to consider. Just my kind of thoughts on it. As for tomorrow, the big story may very well be a story. Caden's story, the former Auburn commit, the 4-star prospect out of the state of Alabama, who fortunately for Clemson, the Tigers were able to replace and I think probably upgrade as much as I like Todd Bates. I think that there is no doubt that a guy like Nick Eason, and given his ties to the same or similar recruiting area, Nick Eason has helped keep this story alive. And, I think Clemson's got a great chance tomorrow to land Caden's story. A couple of other names people are keeping their eyeballs on as well. Certainly T.J. Dudley, another player out of the state of Alabama, outside linebacking prospect. Here's another kid that found an opening when Mario Cristobal left Oregon. He's he was previously committed to the Ducks. And now Clemson's got a chance to haul in a 4-star linebacking prospect, one of those hard-hitting, thumper-type guys that I think plays very well in space. But what a positive finish that would mean if Clemson could get both of those guys tomorrow. And then I think probably the last name that most people are sort of keeping their eyes on is Andrew Paul, 3-star running back out of the state of Texas. And I don't think there's any doubt that this Clemson running back room, this Clemson running back room is absolutely loaded right now. I was looking over some of the notes on Paul from our sister site, texags.com, out in the state of Texas. And I think there's there tends to be a good positive vibe around this kid, just in terms of the type player that he'll be. But ultimately for Clemson, he's a guy that would create a level of depth for the Tigers down the road in the running back room. And again, there's no certainty here with where he ends up going. But I think, for Clemson too, you see that reach. You're already going into Texas and getting guys like Andrew Makuba and R.J. Mickens and now Cade Klubnik. And just to be able to go into the Dallas area and add another talented prospect does not hurt the future. I mean, I remember playing in the old NCAA football game and the pipeline and how valuable that is. And for C.J. Spiller, this could be the start of a relationship with, that area of the country, perhaps even, or some running backs out of the state of Texas that could ultimately help Clemson over the long haul. So who knows? I mean, it is going to be there will be, I would imagine, a small number of guys added, but I think those guys right now are the ones most people are continuing to track. So we'll have updates on all of that. Of course, Clemson will be meeting with the media tomorrow to talk about that, plus some audio tomorrow, or maybe even Thursday, from Clemson's new athletic director, Graham Neff. So we got a whole lot more for you here on the show coming up tomorrow. 803-450-0086. Again, that text line and phone line is available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Don't forget about it. We want to have you be a part of this program. We want to have you contact us. We want you to chat it up with us and spend time talking about the Tigers, the Bulldogs, the Yellow Jackets, and the Seminoles. Again, thank you to Mike Yuva, our good buddy from GamecockCentral.com, for joining us. And we can't wait to talk with you tomorrow. Now, we can talk more about Clemson's schedule for sure, but also the official National Signing Day. We got to get out of here. Until then, as always, y'all take care now and go Tigers.